future me here. Parts of this video had been edited because the keen-eyed among you pointed out a mistake that I had made. So I wanted to make sure that those fixes were added to this video, and we'll talk more about the mistake towards the end of this video. With that being said, enjoy. TP-Link has sent over this absolutely massive box with an EAP 690E HD in it. And I am beyond excited to open this thing up to see what's inside. Now, obviously, I know the access point's inside, but what other accessories might there be? Why is the box so big? Let's find out. Here we go. All right. Finally, like some actual foam. The access point itself, which of course, oh, this thing is heavy, is massive. Oh, wow. This thing is so big. All right, let's get this out of the way for now. All right, that's cool. So they actually included a power adapter for once. Let's see if we can get this thing open. There we go. That's a nice, reminds me of like some high quality packaging right here. TP-Link's getting better at this. And for $500 or around $500, they better include a power adapter. All right, we'll need that for later. Let's see what's under here. Quick installation guide, or pamphlet about other TP-Link Omada products, license, this absolutely massive mounting plate. Oh, okay. So it's just a little sticky. There we go. Probably some like CNC aluminum or something. Has all of our holes for different mounting options. Sealing, junction boxes, US, EU, all that jazz. Pretty common. Glad they're including this and no more plastic. And what is down here? What is this? Okay, that's a little hard to remove. Okay, this must be all of our mounting hardware. Now this immediately reminds me of Ubiquity, which is both awesome, but not original. Okay, so this is like glued down. So we have our ceiling mount options. I'm assuming these are all screws for a ceiling mount. Looks like we have options for maybe screwing into junction boxes as well as the wall. So we have our anchors here for the wall and or ceiling and all sorts of different screws. Really cool they included this because most of the time they just give you like a cheap bag and everything just hangs loose. So this is a nice upgrade. And that appears to be everything that's in the box. As much as I would like to jump straight into bandwidth testing this thing, there are some things we have to talk about first. So like I mentioned before, this is a Wi-Fi 6E capable access point. It can support up to like 2,000 clients according to TP-Link. That's obviously not something I can test here in the home lab. But what's even more cool about this thing is it has a 10 gigabit port on the back. And this is a PoE port as well. So it's 802.BT. So that requires a lot of power. And speaking of power, this access point will use up to 44 watts of power when you have the 2.4, 5 gigahertz, and 6 gigahertz bands going at the same time. If you turn just the 6 gigahertz band off, it'll use about 25 watts, I believe, which is a pretty hefty amount of power. And of course, you can plug in a 12 volt, 4.5 amp plug into this to give it power as well if you don't have 802.3 BT PoE available, and there's a reset button on the rear. Other notable things about this unit is it has a Bluetooth 5.2 on board, which is kind of strange. So I'm interested to see what that will hold for us in the future and what we can do with it now, which is honestly all new to me. So that's something we're gonna have to figure out on the fly. I could go on and on about all the features this thing has, but honestly, you can just look those up yourselves. But the one last thing I wanna mention to you guys while you're on this video is that this does support up to 8 SSIDs per band, which I believe is like 32 SSIDs, which is insane. Okay, so with all that out of the way, it's time to go bandwidth testing. I can't wait anymore. We'll do the teardown later. Because this thing's a big chungus, I'm gonna have to go ahead and mount it to this junction box. So this is a round junction box. All I have to do is line up the holes, if I can freaking find them, and we should be good to go. I'm sure my wife won't mind at all that I've installed this here right next to the other access point. The new EAP 690 is absolutely massive and I love it. It's so big compared to the U6 LR. Here's the floor plan of my house and the various places I stood around performing these tests to give you guys an accurate representation of what the performance might be like in the real world. We have variable distances and variable walls during all tests. Now that I've actually fixed my errors, I'm still seeing the issue where our upload speed is still very poor compared to our download speed. So right now we have the 6 gigahertz band configured to be on the 160 megahertz width. We're using channel 69. These are my only options. I could use any of these. I don't think it really matters. Just for fun, we'll change it to, I don't know, 181, actually to 165. We'll hit apply here. We're going to use medium power, so that way we're not triumphing all over the neighbors. And also the access point is literally mounted right there. So I'm standing directly underneath it, or about as underneath as you can get. And I've just run this wire to a 10 gig switch in the server closet. And it is on a 10 gig switch now. That is part of the problem. Okay, we have our 5 gigahertz bands disabled, both of them. And our 2.4 gigahertz band disabled as well. Okay, so made all the changes. Let's go over here. We'll just run a speed test. So this speed test is running on a local server that has a 10 gig NIC. And we'll see what we can get. So obviously the download speed is really good. I've seen this time and time again. No problems here. It's always the upload speed that is different or not up to par. The delta for the upload speed is always pretty poor, I would say. Okay, so test is complete. Almost 1,000 megabit difference in the download and upload, and that's pretty consistent with what I've been seeing with all of my tests with this device. So with that being said, if you guys have any suggestions on how to fix this issue to get those speeds more close together, I'd love to hear you out and see what your suggestions are in order to fix that. I don't know if it's necessarily a problem, but that is a pretty huge delta, and that does leave me somewhat concerned with my testing or my device. I'm not 100% sure that it is the TP-Link access point itself. I doubt it is. I'm pretty sure it's either something I'm doing wrong or a limitation of my only Wi-Fi 6E laptop. So, of course, take all these tests that you're seeing with grains of salt because I'm human, I make mistakes, and also I don't know what I'm doing. So that helps a lot too. With speed testing out of the way, let's go ahead and take this thing apart and see what's inside. And it's still a little warm from all the testing. I could probably cook an egg on this right now. I don't feel a hole underneath here, which is good. That means we don't have to destroy the sticker. And it looks like we only need to destroy 6 screws. So we'll just start from the edge and work our way all the way around. All right, sweet. So with all 6 screws removed, we should just be able to lift this up and it pops right off. With the top cover removed, we can now see this beautiful PCB that TP-Link has added that no one's ever going to see, or virtually no one's ever going to see. And I think it's really cool that they do this, kind of like Apple does with their PCB. They really flare them up, and I really appreciate that. It's the small things that count. So these structures here are part of the smart antenna array, and there's an algorithm that helps improve performance for any device on the 2.4, 5 gigahertz or 6 gigahertz band. And these are the traditional antenna here. So if my understanding is accurate, we have a grand total of 4 antennas per band. So I'm guessing one of these here would be like two antennas for the 2.4 gigahertz band, and then maybe one of these structures here also has 2 antennas for the smart side of the 2.4 gigahertz band. And then we have, let's say this is for the 5 gigahertz band, and then there's also 2 more antenna over here, let's say, for the 5 gigahertz band, and then also for the 6. So we have a total of 4 antenna per band, which is really cool, and I think that's what really gives this thing, or will give this thing, really great performance. With all 4 screws removed, let's just lightly lift this. There is some resistance. I'm guessing that's a heat sink. Oh, actually, that's got to be the wires. Each one of these wires holding it down. So I guess maybe we won't be able to remove that. Let's put these screws back in because we have those wires attached, and then we will try and pull up the other PCB. All right, last screw removed. Let's lift up the entire unit. So I'm actually grabbing as much as I can underneath. This may be held down by thermal pads. I'm not entirely sure, but I'm not able to just pull it up, at least very well. I'm wondering if there are any screws holding underneath this plate that we can't see. All right, let's see if we can figure this out. Okay, so to get this thing to release, it was actually not that difficult. So I'll try and replicate what I did. I did have to pick it up off the table in order to release it. So basically all I did was take my screwdriver and wedge it between here and the middle PCB and pull up until it came loose. All that is holding this together are these thermal pads, which is what I suspected. So in here, we can actually get a better look at all of the antennae I was talking about earlier. So all of these lead to here, to these, I don't even know what to call them. I don't know what to call them. They're just standoffs, kind of. And I'm guessing these are for the other antennae here. I don't see any labeling specifically for what is what. Oh, there's actually some more antennas right here underneath this tape. There's more antennas. Taking a look at the bottom, we can see 4 distinct units here. I'm guessing each one of these underneath these heat spreaders is for each band. So we have a 2.4 gigahertz driver here, and then we actually have 2 5 gigahertz bands that are separated. We have 5 gigahertz 1 and 2, but they perform pretty much identically as far as I can tell. So I think each one of those is separated to its own, and then this one may or may not be the 6 gigahertz. I actually don't know which order these are configured. I'm just pointing them out or taking guesses what they are. Now, I believe this is either part of the smart antenna array, or basically where the processing is done for the algorithm for that smart functionality that this unit has, or it is part of the Bluetooth 5.2 capability of this device. This could also be part of the 5.2 capability, or maybe it's the driver for the 10 gig NIC here. I'm not actually sure. This could also drive the 10 gig NIC. It's hard to say. Hell, this here could even be the Bluetooth 5.2 processor. I really don't know. I'm just taking guesses, but I would be willing to bet money that these are in fact for each of the Wi-Fi bands. All right, here we go. These odd shaped structures. Hard to tell, but there is a wire in there. You can probably see it right there. Each one of these has one wire coming out from in between all 3 PCBs and going into those. And they are soldered, so this wire is soldered to this PCB here, so there is no actual way to move it. And this looks like little antennae underneath the PCB, if I had to guess. So this is what I'll call the top of the board, or the top of the device. I'm not going to remove this PCB and get in between each of these layers here. So let me flip this over. And here is the bottommost PCB. So not much to see here. Don't believe. All those different wires going all over the place. If any of these come disconnected, then you're probably going to have poor signal. Oops. It's interesting that these are taped, but the rest are not. I wonder why that is. Okay, well, I think that pretty much shows everything off. I'm not sure what else I need to show you within this. All right, one last thing to note here are about these screws, and these screws are not magnetic. So magnet, or maybe they're a little magnetic, but this is a very powerful magnet. And the fact that these aren't magnetic at all says a lot. So like that picks up pretty far. And there's nothing here. So I think they may have cheaped out on these screws, or we may have gotten something different, because previously all screws were magnetic. Interesting change. Very interesting device so far. So the last thing on the agenda here, or at least I think it's the last thing on the agenda here, is to try and figure out why this has Bluetooth on it and what we can do with it. So I'm gonna get this reassembled. We'll get it all plugged back in. We won't plug it into the Omada controller, so that way we can try and get an idea of just, you know, this thing completely unconfigured. What happens? Maybe we need Bluetooth to interface with it. That's probably what it is. Okay, well, after playing around with the TP-Link Omada app, I wasn't really able to determine what the Bluetooth 5.2 functionality on this does. I can confirm that it does have it based off the spec sheet for this, but that's about all I can say with Bluetooth in regards to this unit. But moving on, let's talk about its size. So obviously it's pretty freaking large. We have it compared to an EAP 660 or 670. The 660 HD and 670 are the same size. So this has got quite a larger diameter than the 670. And as you can tell, just standing on the table, it's pretty freaking tall. So let's get some different shots of these, so that way you can really get a good idea of just how much bigger the 690E is compared to its cousins. While the 690 does manage to be larger in diameter, it still does a good job of actually being just ever so slightly thinner than the 670 and 660. And as we can tell, it is still quite large, obviously larger than a Ubiquiti U6LR with its very sleek design. But overall, I would say that even though the 690E has a larger diameter, it still does a pretty good job of being as low profile as it can be, given the fact this thing is loaded with antennae. Like, there's literally 2 or 4 sets of antenna for the 2.4 gigahertz band, 4 antenna for the 5 gigahertz band, and I believe 4 for the 6 gigahertz band as well. So that's quite a lot of antennas to pack in there. And of course, all of those chips need cooling. So we have tons of heatsink in there as well, which the entire lower chassis of this unit does act as a heatsink. And well, that's pretty much all I can show you as far as size goes. To end this video, let's talk about the mistake that I made previously in the video that you can no longer watch. So what happened is my server that has a 10 gig NIC also has 1 gigabit NICs on board as well. And I actually use one of those 1 gigabit NICs as part of some of the testing that I do with containers and other things of that nature. And the cables that come out of the back of that are all identical. So one of the cables goes to a totally separate switch to my Ubiquiti side of the house. And that one basically never gets unplugged because it's always running 24/7, 365, and I really need that connection to stay open. Now, the second 10 gig NIC, I move that around all the time because I'm always doing testing for different containers and things of that nature. And the same can be said with that 1 gigabit NIC as well. And those two cables look alike, and they're always usually hanging around each other like this or some other manner. And I usually do a really good job of making sure that they stay fairly separate or remembering which one's which. but this time I did not, which caused the results of my previous video to be skewed against TP-Link. So this switch is actually much faster than what was depicted in the previous video, and I still think that we may not be seeing accurate results. I don't really know anymore. I'm questioning my entire reality after this whole debacle, but I think the results are actually accurate now that I've fixed the problem of plugging in my server to the 10 gig NIC. My server's 10 gig NIC is now plugged into the 10 gig switch versus the 1 gig NIC being plugged into the 10 gig switch, which I don't know how I didn't catch. I just assumed that I just had poor reception because I'm not really an expert in networking. And so I was like, oh, it just got to be poor reception. But I did question myself enough where I even thought about delaying the video and retesting everything. But I reassured myself incorrectly, saying that it was probably fine and that I should just carry through the release. So that was a big whoopsie daisy on my part. I'm gonna do a lot better, and I'm gonna go back there and actually change the color of the cables, or maybe label them so I know that one of them is in fact a 10 gig cable, or well, connected to a 10 gig NIC, and the other one is connected to a 1 gig NIC. I've got to change that up because I don't want that to be a problem in the future that we run into. So that, yeah, like I said, big whoops on my part. And I want to thank the people in the comments, or thank you guys, the viewers actually, who were leaving comments saying that you were suspicious of my results, and there must be a problem, and maybe to try different cables, or pointing out that something was definitely wrong with my results. And I'm very, very thankful that you guys watched the video, presumably all the way through, and found those errors and were able to point them out to me. And I'm sorry that it took so long for me to actually go through and fix those errors. I don't know. I guess I kind of doubled down a little bit on my idea that it was probably fine. But, you know, I started playing around with it tonight, actually. Not tonight of the video release, but tonight. And then I realized that something was definitely wrong and I needed to get it fixed ASAP. And so again, thank you guys so much for following along and, you know, keeping up with the channel and pointing out any mistakes I make. I really do appreciate that you guys are pointing out those mistakes. And well, I guess I'll try and do better in the future and not make those mistakes again. So thank you so much. Thank you, TP-Link, for sending this device out. Sorry about messing it up the first time. Hopefully we fixed it for this re-release of the same video. Peace.